Claire Williams and Susie Wolff. Mick Fleetwood will in a few months be getting a small cheque for that. So I hope that neither of you are going to do a Grace Jones and Russell Harty on me if I don't do the tennis thing here. But thank you for joining us. This is obviously a very exciting race weekend because last time out, Williams overhauled Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. So that must have been quite momentous to do it in their back garden, pretty much, Claire.
Yeah, it was fantastic for us in Monza. Valtteri and Felipe did a great job, as they've been doing all year. And like you said, we did steal Ferrari's P3, which for me, I've always hated Ferrari all my life. I've been growing up in the Williams household, so it was a real joy when I got to go on Italian television and claim our P3 from Ferrari in their backyard.
It's a shame, in a way, isn't it, that having women in such a prominent position in motor racing is such an unusual thing that we're actually up here talking about it today. But Susie, you have had to push very hard to get into the position you have, simply because there's just so little room for testing nowadays, isn't there, because of the testing regulations. You have to really make your efforts count, and it was a bit unfortunate that at Silverstone your engine failed because it was an older unit, but then in Germany you managed to get out and actually do some work, which is the function.
Yeah, it's such a big issue, particularly in motorsport, because it's seen as such a male-dominated arena, this whole female issue. And it was never really an issue for me. You know, I started racing when I was only 8 years old, and I was never on a crusade to show what a woman could achieve in racing or to beat as many boys as I could. I simply found my passion in life very early. I loved racing, and at 8 years old, you don't think about a future career, or you just do what you like doing in that moment. And for me, it was always racing. And I progressed through the ranks, and I'm a great believer that to get to Formula One is tough for any driver, regardless of gender. So I think, of course, it's going to be difficult to get many women into Formula One because there's simply not enough women racing for the best to rise to the top. And young girls who maybe have a passion for racing or Formula One, they have no clear role model to look up to. But the one big difference with our sport, when I'm out on track with my race suit and helmet on, unlike sports like football or tennis, you don't see me. You don't see that I'm a woman. So when you're watching a race, you're simply watching drivers in cars and unaware of their facial expressions or what they actually look like. And that's why it all comes down to performance. And I think we're seeing more and more women come into Formula One and be successful in Formula One. And it's a really positive thing because nobody tried to get more women involved. Nobody said, okay, we have to be more equal. How do we get more women in? They simply came, performed, did a good job, and that's why they're still there, and that's why more and more are coming in.
I think we should probably emphasise the point to the people out there who are perhaps not very au fait with the ins and outs of Formula One, that track time is so precious because of the lack of testing. When you get in that car, you actually have to do a job. You've got a programme to work through. It's not a drive around and wave at the crowd. It's not a PR thing. You actually have a job of work to do.
Yeah, it was really incredible for me that many people viewed me joining Williams and doing my drives as a PR stunt. I mean, anyone that knows the Williams family know that they would never put somebody in one of their cars which wasn't capable of doing a good job. And I think that's something I will always fight against because there are so few women and because I get so much attention being one of the few women. Everybody else will view it as a PR stunt because, of course, it does attract a lot of attention. But I think the main reason it attracts attention is because a successful woman in Formula One is the one thing still left to happen. I think many people want to see it happen. Many people wonder why it hasn't happened. And I think generally in the world, it's good to be a woman right now. People want to see equality. Women want to see other women being successful. So it's good timing.
Yeah, and the thing that brought home to me just how momentous it was when you got in the car at Silverstone was that our website, autosport.com, experienced quite a surge in traffic with any story involving you that weekend and then again at Hockenheim. So the question I think that a lot of the people out here will be thinking is how can we use that interest to sort of grow the audience, particularly with a view to Asia as the sport expands into other markets here?
Well, I certainly see and it's what's very positive for me. People see my story as very inspirational, and I always say, well, wait, I've got a lot more still to achieve, and for me, I haven't achieved that much yet. But for me, it's really interesting to see the amount of women who get in contact with me and are inspired by me, particularly in Asia. I've been doing quite a lot of events leading up to the race this weekend with various different sponsors, and a lot of those roles are very much diversity-based. And it's incredible the amount of women who are now becoming very interested in Formula One and are questioning, well, actually, why isn't there a woman there? We want to see a woman there. And I think that's something that's very positive for the women that are in Formula One, and it's something that is changing the sport slowly but surely.
It's also quite useful, turning to you, Claire, in terms of engaging with potential sponsors, because Williams, to my mind, are the perfect team to be talking about here, because you aren't owned by a car manufacturer that has a sales agenda or a soft drink manufacturer. The Williams team, in effect, lives and dies on its performance on track and its sponsorship portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. We're one of the last remaining independent teams in Formula One. Frank Williams, our team principal, he started the team nearly 4 decades ago now and is still racing, which is a huge success. But he's done that purely, or he's kept the team going purely by bringing in sponsors. They are our lifeblood. They are what keep us racing. We don't, as you say, have the luxury of a major drinks manufacturer or a car manufacturer supporting us, bankrolling us to go racing. So our partners are hugely important to us, and we're very lucky that we have a really, really strong partner community, a lot of whom have been with the team for 10, 15 years. Thomson Reuters, for example, they've partnered the team. This is their 14th season, so we're celebrating 15 years of partnership next year with them.
What sort of activities do you go about in a weekend to engage with your sponsors and entertain them? We were talking just in the green room earlier about hospitality and how guests don't want to necessarily go to Paddock Club. They want to come and see your motorhome and come into the garage and really see what happens.
I think for us at Williams, we love what we do, and I always talk when I'm talking to prospective partners that, we do love what we do and we love sharing it. It's not just a case of a partner coming on board, signing their check, and then that's it. We do really create some wonderful activation programs for our sponsors. We have to, but we also really enjoy doing it. We love sharing what we do in Formula One. Formula One itself is a fantastic sport, and as Susie mentioned, we're here a few days before the Grand Prix. We do that pretty much every venue we go to do work for our partners in their markets. And then over a Grand Prix weekend, obviously we have a huge amount of activation that goes on, from bringing senior guests into Paddock Club or bringing them into our motorhome to get them a little bit closer to the team. There's nothing nicer than taking a guest into the garage during a session and seeing their faces when the cars fire up for the first time. It is a great, great platform.
What about social media? I'm very interested to hear some of the previous panels talking about the numbers involved in social media. Williams is pretty active on Twitter, I've noticed. You have the track walkabouts and all that sort of thing. How do you actually go about managing that? Because it'd be very easy when taking pictures in the garage for something wholly inappropriate to be seen, like a new part of the car or something like that.
I wish we were a little bit more inappropriate about some of the stuff we do. I think in Formula One in general, I think we've become a little bit sanitized. And I think if we want to engage a whole new audience, and particularly a young audience, the younger generation, that we do need to engage at the moment, we need to be opening our doors and making Formula One a whole lot more accessible to those people. People want to see behind the scenes. Obviously what goes on a Sunday afternoon when the lights go out and the drivers are doing their stuff on track is fantastic, and I think this has been one of the most exciting seasons we've had in our sport. But I do think that the social media element of what we do is hugely critical to bringing in new audiences and engaging the ones that we have. There's some great stuff that we can do. You mentioned that we do the track walk, twittering. Our press officer goes a bit crazy on that. But I love that. I want her to, show people behind the scenes at Williams. It's so important to us. And I think we were one of the first teams as well that actually went live on Twitter, and we opened up testing when we started tweeting from behind the scenes in Jerez. 5 years ago, we were one of the first teams to do that. We have 300,000 followers on Twitter now. We want to, get it up. Formula One is so competitive across every element, not just on the racetrack, but also, the number of Twitter followers we all have and things like that.
I was quite alarmed to see you broadcasting your husband's injuries in that bike accident on Twitter. What went through your mind?
That was just a plug to try and get more followers, actually. Go for the sympathy vote.
You did get an awful number of retweets out of that, wasn't it? It is amazing quite what people really sort of choose to send out to their followers. How much interaction do you do with your followers on Twitter? Because you're fairly active as well, aren't you?
It was actually really interesting to hear the panel discussion before, and I certainly got my eyes open to a couple of the figures and learned a lot. It's always a difficult one because I'm quite a private person. I don't want to share everything with those who are following me, but in the same respect, you want to give a behind-the-scenes view to people. You want to let them see more. You don't just want to post promotional pictures all the time. So it's a very fine balance. And I certainly see on my Facebook and Twitter, if I have a few days where I'm too busy to post, my new likes go down very sharply. So it's about being consistent. And like they said before, it's about being authentic, showing your true character, not always trying to appear perfect or look the best. When I take my helmet off, I look not my best at all, but you've got to show the authentic side of yourself. And for me, it's a fine balance between the racing, the diversity, the sport, and it's just trying to navigate your way through that and always be open to the new ideas that are coming, because I think social media is changing so quickly all the time. You have to be up to date with what's happening.
So there's some people that I have muted, particularly one TV commentator who I've muted on Twitter because he tweets too much. But it is, as you say, very personality based. And the sport itself doesn't have a central PR and marketing machine, so there's no personality coming through there. So really, Claire, as a team, you have to have a forward-facing personality, don't you? And it has to be sort of fairly integrated with the brand, because our sport's a little bit bizarre in that you have people who are fans of teams, but also people who are fans of drivers individually, and the two can kind of intermingle.
Yeah, absolutely, and we are slightly different in that sense to football. I think, most people are fans of Formula One, are fans of drivers, and then the larger teams, and we have to do a lot of work in order to engage fans. Particularly with our drivers, our lineups can change year on year. We have to do a huge amount of work to engage people with not only our drivers but us as a team. And for Williams, we have been in the sport for a long time, and we're very lucky that we do have some incredibly loyal fans that have followed us through the highs and the lows, but we want to engage a new audience, and we want to be seen as a refreshed, revitalized young brand in Formula One. And I think the Martini partnership that we started this year has really helped dust us off, and you can see across our livery that's a real marker in the sand as to where we want to go in the future. But it is so important that our sport engages those new fans, as I've said, and you mentioned that we don't have a central PR or marketing function in Formula One, which I think for a sports entity is, I think it's a shame, because I think there's so much more that we could do if we did all come together, as a group, rather than what we're doing at the moment, which is activating individually, whether that be drivers or as teams. If we came together, it would be a much more powerful force.
Well, Formula One's ringmaster is definitely not a millennial, is he? Because he's in his 80s, so I'm not sure if he's he's probably not on Facebook either.
I believe actually recently he's come out saying that he is going to start embracing social media, and I think that is really important for Mr. Eccleston to do that, and he has now come out, and I think, who knows, we might see him on Twitter sometime soon.
Yeah. He does like to stir things up, so he'd probably be quite fun on Twitter. And just thinking back a couple of years to Lewis Hamilton tweeting his telemetry trace after the Belgian Grand Prix to show the differences between him and his teammate. And that obviously didn't go down very well with McLaren. Have you actually laid down any guidelines with your drivers about what they can and can't say and how they should conduct themselves on?
Formula One drivers these days, they know what they need, they have to do, what the boundaries are, and we're very lucky in that. I remember the days of, even up to 10 years ago, having race drivers that were slightly unruly. I was a press officer in my former life, and working with the likes of Juan Pablo Montoya or Ralf Schumacher was, always a bit of a nightmare because you never knew what they were going to come out with next. Fortunately, social media hadn't taken off as much as it has today. But our drivers, they're really good. They know, the line to toe. But again, as I said, I think Formula One is a little bit sanitized. I think we need to build the personalities of our racing drivers so people engage with them a little bit more. That's not to say that we don't have some great personalities in Formula One. We do. I think that we should just loosen the reins a little bit on them.
It would certainly be a bit more fun sometimes for some drivers, but also a lot of them kind of like that safety blanket of not being interesting, don't they? Like Kimi Räikkönen makes a point of being as uninteresting as possible when he's in press conferences.
Yeah, he does, but that makes him fascinating. People love Kimi, and they love the fact that he doesn't tell everybody what he's doing. And like Susie says, I think there's a line, when you are in the spotlight, you don't want everybody to know the intricacies of your personal life. That's hugely important. And I think it is a personal choice, social media. I think some people want to engage with it, and that's great, but you can't force people to do it. I don't believe Sebastian Vettel tweets. I know he gets a lot of criticism for that, but I think it has to be a personal choice. I think, otherwise it doesn't work if you're forced to go on Twitter and when you don't really want to.
And some drivers, you get the impression that it's not actually being done by them, that it's being done by their media handlers or whatnot, so the personality doesn't come through there. I've mentioned no names, but...
not our drivers.
Neither of your drivers, I don't think. In terms of branding, the sport has a lot of competing brands, and some kind of a question for you both, really. Susie, I know you're a UBS ambassador and have some work to do with them later on this evening. What do these sponsors actually get from Formula One? How do you actually go about maximising their value from the amount they spend?
I think there's two tiers. It's obviously positioning on either the race car or the race track, because then you get branding that goes out to a global audience and gets a lot of attraction, but then you have the activation side. And my role with UBS is very much based on the diversity side, because the world of banking is very similar to the world of motorsport in that there are not many women, and the women that are in banking face the same challenges as the women in motorsport, getting the elbows out and fighting for your position and how you get to the top and stay at the top. So I think the link up was very good in that sense. And I think as a brand or as a sponsor, you can get a lot from Formula One. There's a lot to offer. You have to define what exactly it is you want, whether it's global recognition for your brand or the chance to invite sponsors to the racetrack to be part of the team for the weekend. But for me, it's quite incredible. Sometimes we get guests who are CEOs of big worldwide companies with hundreds and thousands of employees, and they get to the Formula One and they're like little kids. That's where the passion for the sport really comes out, and that's where you see what Formula One has. It has the ability to really inspire people and get them passionate because they are the best racing cars in the world.
I suppose, Claire, that is the important thing, isn't it? A sponsor is more than just a sticker on a car nowadays. You really have to show return on investment.
Yeah, I think Formula One over the past few years, Formula One's sponsorship model has shifted significantly, and Susie talked about one element of branding, visibility, putting a brand on your race car. That now, I do all the commercial work for our team, and that is the last piece of the conversation that the majority of brands that I talk to want to have. Most people say, I'm not actually interested now in putting my sticker on your car. There are so many elements of a Formula One sponsorship that are so much more important to the businesses that we're talking to, and I think the biggest one, like Susie mentioned, is a B2B element of coming racing. We host a huge number of CEOs, C-suite guests in Formula One in the paddock over a Grand Prix weekend. There are thousands of people that turn up and are entertained in Paddock Club, and the opportunities that can afford, the connections that you can make. If you're a CEO of one business and you're in a room with another CEO, the deals that are done in a Formula One paddock over race weekend, are surprising sometimes. So that is, it's a great platform platform from that perspective. But there are so many different elements to Formula One sponsorships that, you might not necessarily be aware of. So, the diversity piece for Williams at the moment is, a pivotal element of a lot of the proposals and the conversations around prospective partners that I'm having at the moment. People are fascinated by the fact that at Williams we have 2 girls, 2 women in the positions that we are, and with the conversations and the political element of diversity that governments are having at the moment, it can play a really important part. And so, those conversations for us for next year are really exciting, and I think Williams has that USP. But so Formula One does connect lots of different sponsorship elements.
And a B2C-based sponsor can also play a role in B2B stuff. For instance, Martini, you have that lovely bar on top of your motorhome at European events. So Martini can help facilitate other sponsors who are more sort of B2B, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, it works. We've got a lot of consumer brands in Formula One. At Williams, we don't have as many as perhaps we would like operating that market. But as you mentioned, we do have this partnership with Martini, which for us is a whole new kind of ball game. It is talking to a completely different audience. And so it's really exciting to see the activations that they're doing. I mean, last night we were hosting a party in a nightclub, which, I think if Frank found out about, he'd kind of think that it was slightly bizarre that Williams was doing something like that. But it's great to see those new activation levels. And, a brand like Martini operating in Formula One, does create a completely different platform for activation and talks to a new audience, brings a new audience in, because it takes Formula One out of its natural environment of the racetrack and takes it around cities. They do experiential activity in five markets that we go to. This year they take a bar out, they have a show car, our drivers go along and make cocktails. It's just a whole different ball game for us.
And Susie, you do a lot of media work as well throughout a Grand Prix weekend, because I know that when we tried to photograph you for an interview at Silverstone, we were waiting for a very long time because you had...
Sorry for that.
You had a conga line of TV people sort of chasing after you. How much time do you spend purely in a race weekend, rather than being in the garage and looking at data and that sort of thing, actually working with the media and sponsors and that sort of thing?
It's definitely a real balancing act, because of course you've got to keep the media happy, but I think the one great thing in the team is the performance is always the number one factor. So everything that I'll be asked to do will always be based around my engineering meetings, around my strategy meetings, so that the performance is ultimately always the number one goal. Secondary is, of course, media, and the media, it takes a lot of energy for the race drivers, because you are constantly talking. You get asked sometimes quite sensitive questions, but it's definitely a part of the job. You have to realize that, and like Claire said, it's about not always being too corporate. Of course, you know that you're representing a team, you're representing brands, but you also need to represent yourself and be yourself and be authentic. So show some emotion and not be scared to show emotion. But media work is a huge part of the weekend or of the job.
Claire, I was wondering how important exposure on TV is to you based on that, because Formula One is challenging in that if you are in a race on your own, you aren't necessarily getting that much attention from the TV cameras. And if we look back to the Italian Grand Prix, you had one driver who was running in third place for much of the race. He got that nailed down very early, and he went on to finish on the podium. But we didn't really see much of him on TV, whereas Valtteri had a terrible start, dropped down nearly out of the top 10, I think, and then had to fight his way back up, dropped down again at the pit stops, had to fight his way back up again, and he was barely off the TV.
Yeah, I know, thank God. So it is the TV piece for us, is always interesting, and it's all obviously edited by FOM. They're the broadcaster, the rights holder that send out to all the broadcasters. But they do it in a fair way. I always kind of find it slightly weird that, like the Mercedes at the moment, they're not getting the coverage just because they are so far out ahead. So it is a bit of an anomaly. But like you say, for Williams, last race, Felipe was in second. Once he'd got there and established that position, the cameras came off him. But Valtteri, making his way up the field twice, gave the coverage that we really needed. And as much as I said earlier that the sticker on the car for brands these days isn't the pivotal point of a sponsorship, they're looking at the numbers after every Grand Prix to make sure that they've achieved the exposure that they want out of every Grand Prix. And fortunately in Monza, our title partner Martini received the most branding out of the whole partner suite of Formula One, so that was a great result for them. So it is slightly anomalous, the coverage in our sport, but this year, we're topping the P3 and P4 with the coverage that we're getting. And in Formula One we get the most amount of eyeballs of any sport. We have a cumulative audience in Formula One of more than 1 billion every season. So you can't compete with that when you're in another sport, and we race every second weekend.
And up until last year, you had a driver who occasionally crashed into people, so you guaranteed a few eyeballs from that.
Yes, but he would crash in the first or second lap, and then that's your coverage done.
Poor old Pasta. Do you feel that you need to have? I hesitate to say gimmick, but there's very often. In sport nowadays, you have that kind of the reaction shot from the coaching staff in a ball game. It's become the de rigueur thing. You see someone miss a goal, cut to the manager on the touchlines, holding his head in his hands or gesticulating, and very often before the race starts, the camera prowls the pit lane, and you have the zoom in on people looking pensive, and you've got that sort of pensive look down to a T. Christian Horner's got his fidgety foot. I mean, are you aware of the cameras sort of creeping up on you?
Yeah, they're there all the time. They really get in your face. And, I get emails criticizing me for how I look on TV and, why don't you smile more? And I always kind of say, well, you aren't at your laptops, on a Monday morning smiling at your computer and waving to people. We're there, we're doing a job, and we take it hugely seriously. Williams, as I said before, we're an independent team. Our second revenue stream comes from prize money, and that's based on where we finish in the Constructors' Championship. So if we don't have a good race and we don't get those points and we finish sixth in the Constructors at the end of the year, then our prize money is affected in the realms of millions. So when you are watching Grand Prix, it's not just, you're not a fan watching two cars and having a nice afternoon. You're there hoping that your drivers finish in the highest positions possible in order to get those points for the Constructors' Championship, because at the end of the day, it's that money that keeps our business alive. And we have 650 people that work at Williams, and we're responsible for their livelihoods.
Points make prizes, as a quiz show host once said. The other thing that's happening this weekend, and today in fact, is that there's going to be a big reveal, we hear, with Johnny Walker, and possibly having a tie-up with FOM, and that's going to be happening in an hour or so's time. It is the case that this sport in some ways is competing with itself, because you have the promoter also competing for sponsors with some of the teams. If Johnny Walker is going to FOM, that will be possibly coming off the McLaren team. We've seen Emirates coming off a car and becoming an official sponsor, and we also have Hublot that have come away and become a sponsor of Ferrari. And now we have Rolex, who you'd imagine there's a team kicking themselves for not having Rolex on their cars. That must make it a little bit challenging for you, so in terms of what you can offer to sponsors, because naturally the people who've got the trackside signage are going to be a little bit more prominent. Do you ever actually have a conversation with sponsors saying, this is what we can give you, this is what we can't give you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the FOM piece has come in only in recent years. And you can't argue with what they can offer brands. They can offer that great visibility trackside, but what they can't offer is access to the teams. And really, I think that's that is what people want. They want that association, that connection into a race team. They want to get to the heart of what a team does over a Grand Prix weekend. And so when they do make that partnership with FOM, all they get is the trackside branding and access to Paddock Club. And so that closes a whole door of activity that you can do with race drivers being entertained in the paddock, in teams' motorhomes, having garage tours, and all the other rights and benefits that we can offer as a team. What we find now is a lot of those sponsors that have done those partnerships with FOM are now actively talking to teams in order to get some added rights and benefits so that they can bring their guests into teams over race weekends. So actually, as much as, it does, of course, create more competition for the teams, but, we work in sponsorship and we have competition from other sports, social media, etc. That's just the way life is. We now actually can embrace that and have those conversations with partners that are partnering with FOM and offer them an added benefit in addition to what they're getting. So as long as you kind of go about it in the right way, the teams can benefit as much as FOM can.
Susie, from a driver's point of view, how's it been for you going out and finding sponsors throughout your career, and what sort of conversations do you have and to say, this is what I can offer you, this is what you'll get out of it?
The one big difficulty with racing, and I'm glad I'm not a youngster racing anymore, is you've got to find sponsorship. You've got to have money to go racing. It's not like tennis or football. You need a pitch and a ball, or a court and a ball and a couple of rackets. You need a lot of money to simply go racing. And if you want to get yourself into the best team, you need either family money behind you, or a connection to a company, or a simple sponsorship deal. And of course, the problem is when tobacco sponsorship left Formula One, it meant that there was a scramble for all the other sponsorships which were available. And it's very difficult as a young driver, because when I started racing at 8, came up through the ranks, and at 18 was racing in the World Championships. And suddenly, from spending 20, 30,000 a year, you're expected to find 200,000 to move into single-seaters. And if you want to go into Formula 3, which is the junior category on the ladder to Formula 1, you're looking at a budget of €500,000. If you want to compete on the race weekends in a junior category with the Formula 1, you're looking at over €1 million. And that's an incredible amount of money for a driver to find to go racing. Many people said, okay, but you're a woman. You can go and get feminine brands. You stand out a mile, you get so much media attention. Where are those female brands? I never found them on my way up to racing. And I can only think that was because there wasn't a woman that was successful at the top tier of motorsport. So many of the brands said, we're just going to watch, wait till you get there and maybe jump in, but we're not too sure whether that fits for us. So it is very, very difficult as a driver to get to the pinnacle of motorsport, even if you are very, very talented. And in Formula One, there are only 22 spaces on the grid, and every young, talented driver dreams of getting to Formula One. So it's incredibly tough. And like you mentioned earlier, testing is banned now in Formula One. When Lewis Hamilton moved into Formula One as a rookie, before he took part in his first race, he completed 26,000 kilometers of testing. Next year, we'll see Max Verstappen, who's only 17, take to the grid in Melbourne, and he'll be very lucky to get 6,000 kilometers of testing. So that's made it even harder for drivers to get time in the car, so that when their opportunity does come, they can be very impressive, because without a doubt, you have to be an outstanding talent to become a world champion in Formula One.
It's interesting, that point about the female brands, because I remember many years ago, and you'll remember this, Claire, you were sponsored by Nicotin CQ, I think. You carried their branding on the Williams car, and one of our ads team phoned them up and tried to sell them an ad, and their response was, well, our brand's aimed at women, and women don't like motor racing, so no, we won't advertise in your magazine. And you sort of think, well, if that's your attitude, why are you sponsoring a Formula One team then? It's just a kind of an incredibly negative position to take.
I'm not sure of the exact figures. Maybe Claire knows more as to what it is male-female, but I mean, I think, in my perception, is there's a lot of female fans.
Yes, it's 38% of our total audience is female, which is significant considering the perception of Formula One is that it's a very male-dominated and viewed sport.
And you can tell from your interactions with social media as well, because we have 110, 115,000 followers on Twitter, and a lot of them are women. And I think 30% of our circulation is, certainly in the UK at least, is female. So that is a significant portion of the readership and the viewership. So certainly there's an audience that can be built.
Slowly but surely.
Do you think that Formula One is doing enough, not just to grow its audience, but also to engage with sponsors in Asia? Because you look around and up and down the grid, I think the only really high-profile sponsor from the Asian continent is Petronas on the Mercedes, and you look at a lot of the other big brands that are out there, Samsung, LG, have either not taken a pass at Formula One, or they've, in the case of LG, come and gone, having decided that it's not for them. You know, what can Formula One do to engage with sponsors in this market?
I think Formula One does a pretty good job, I think, as a platform. Of course, I'm going to say that. But I think as a sponsorship platform, it can tick so many boxes. I just think that the economic climate at the moment doesn't help, and the level of competition out there that there is for marketing dollars makes it so much harder when you are going out. But I think as a whole, Formula One works really, really well as a platform. And you only have to look at our TV numbers to know that, and then you bolt on all the incremental benefits that you can have as part of a partnership in Formula One, and it does work. But I do think as a sport, we have some issues at the moment that we are facing in general in order to make our sport or remain popular. The audience numbers have been declining slightly in key markets for us. And as a sport, as a group of teams, we need to come together and address those issues that we're currently facing to make sure that the audiences do remain stable and actually so that we do grow them in the future and engage this younger audience. And that is all about us coming together, us working together, and coming up with some really key marketing and PR campaigns that we can drive footfall to come to races, to watch us go racing, and then to turn on TVs at home. It's so important for our sport, and it's so easy to do some very basic things that we currently aren't doing. Over a race weekend to make coming to a Grand Prix more exciting for people. It costs a huge amount of money to come and watch a Grand Prix. I think prices are different in different markets. I'm not sure how much it is here, but in some Grand Prix it costs €400 to buy one ticket, and if you're taking a family of four, that's the price of a nice holiday every year. So we need to do more in order to give more back to our fans to keep them watching what we're doing.
Susie, you were taking a lot of notes on that front during one of the previous sessions when the speakers were talking about second screens and the way young people actually consume sport these days. What do you think we can do to engage with the millennial generation to interact with the sport rather than not bothering to watch it on the telly and just fiddle with their iPads instead?
I think everyone has an opinion on it, but an interesting thing happened to me because I followed German touring cars, a championship I used to race in, and I was on holiday in Italy. And in the morning, on a Sunday morning, when the race was due to start at 2 p.m, my husband and I, who are big motorsport fans, that's our jobs, we said to each other, how do we plan the whole day to be at 2 o'clock in front of the TV to watch the race? And we kind of thought to ourselves, why is it that we're having to plan our whole day to be in front of a TV to watch the race at 2 o'clock? Why aren't we able to watch it on our iPad wherever we are? And of course, that's a big discussion for Formula One also. It's a fine balance because it's commercial. There's a lot of money involved. The TV stations pay big money to broadcast the Formula One. So can we have it available over the internet? I would also love to see a highlights package because I'm well aware that you have to be a big fan of Formula One to sit for nearly 2 hours on a Sunday and watch the race from start to finish. Maybe you want to see highlights of 30 minutes, highlights of 15 minutes, and then highlights of 5 minutes for those who just want to know what happened in the race roughly. I think that's what I would like to see it moving more towards. It's without a doubt trying to find the commercial way for that to happen. But I think if the younger generation are going to get more interested in Formula One, it has to move in that direction. We have to be more accessible. It cannot be that your whole Sunday has to be planned around being in front of the TV at 2 o'clock.
That's very, very sort of salient point there. What Claire, do you think the teams can offer in terms of a sort of digital proposition without treading on the toes of the broadcasters? Through your website, you've sort of gone some of the way to opening the doors via twit pics and things like that of what you get up to at a race weekend. Do you think there's room to put a little bit more insight from the race weekend onto the website? Not so much live data, because that might be a little bit too geeky, but some people might like that.
Yeah, there's always so much more that you can do, but I think one of the issues that we have, and it talks very much to the business model that we have in Formula One, is the way the broadcast situation is, and that we actually as teams aren't allowed to do any filming within the paddock area over a Grand Prix weekend. So actually, for us, our hands are really very tied as to what we're allowed to put out there. We would love to be able to, film Valtteri getting ready, for a Grand Prix, filming him doing his warm-up sessions in his little room. We'd love to be able to put that out there, but we're so severely restricted by FOM based on the business model that Bernie's created, which is a fantastic business model with the broadcasters that we have, that obviously provides the constructors fund for us. So we can't criticise that, but we have to find a way whereby we can open the doors of Formula One more, so that we can engage that audience. Because the stuff that goes on behind the scenes for me is the stuff that people wants to see, and it's the really exciting thing that we do. People want to know what Valtteri has for lunch before a Grand Prix, or what Felipe does on a Saturday night in order to prepare himself for the race ahead. And I'd love to see us as teams, and particularly Williams, doing a lot more of that and putting a lot more of that content out there. I think we've barely scratched the surface. Yes, we do a great job on Twitter, over a Grand Prix, but, using YouTube, we should be using YouTube a lot more. We have a channel at the moment on there, but, time restrictions, budget restrictions always kind of play a part in what you can do. And as I said, tie that in with the piece around filming restrictions, actually trackside. I think teams all would like to do a whole lot more, but there are restrictions in place that prevent us from doing so.
Speaking of timing restrictions, I'm very aware that, Susie, you've got another engagement you've got to go onto. So we'll draw this to a close. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could show your appreciation for our guests from the Martini Williams Racing Team, Susie Wolff and Claire Williams. Thank you very much.